So Edil, if there appears to be a dearth of effective unifying leaders in the diaspora, okay, and sympathetic ones or ones that are kind of empathetic to the concerns of diasporan Armenians, and here I'm going to say from anywhere in the world, not just the United States. If you agree with the statement, even to some extent, what can we do to identify and cultivate such leaders? And if there are good leaders out there, who are they and how can we support them, as opposed to the robber barons or the oligarchs or the people who've taken a leadership role in representing the diaspora?
I think that for me, the motivation, part of the motivation and the vision for Birthright Armenia was that I was concerned that the leaders of the Armenian diasporan institutions, especially from my experience here in America, were lacking a true inner understanding of the situation in Armenia from the ground, from the people's perspective. And I feared that the people that were in their 20s and 30s, 20 or 30 years from now, if they lacked that understanding, and they didn't get that understanding when they were young, that they would lead our Armenian institutions in a direction that was a tangent to when it should be running parallel to Armenia. And so for me, you know, my hope was to nurture young people to truly have an experience immersed within the local lives of Armenians and mingling with the peers that are in their 20s now, who many of which don't even remember the Soviet Union, and create bonds so that when they become future leaders, that they will have those relationships in Armenia. And my one challenge that I'm sensing from our alumni is that so many of the existing Armenian institutions don't welcome people in their 20s and early 30s. Not that they want to go to a lot of meetings because they're just starting out their families, but that's where the energy is. That's where the fearlessness is to say anything is possible. Those are the people you want on your board, okay? Because they will inspire you. They inspire me every single day. And so for me, what I'm sensing is a lot of our alumni that come back energized and want to make a difference are sort of creating their own little projects and their own little mini institutions that may not grow up to be the future AGBUs or the whatevers of the world, but that's the way that they focus their energies. And what my concern is that our great institutions are missing that energy and that drive that we all need as board members of the institutions to keep us inspired. So that's a problem, and I would hopefully welcome more of our existing institutions to welcome people in their 20s and 30s.
Okay. And thank you, Edil. So Edgar was. Okay. If anybody has cards, please pass them to the side, and someone will come around to collect them. Okay. In the meantime, I'm going to ask Edgar, who was born in Armenia, came here at what age?
6.
At 6 years old, came to America, and actually did Birthright in one of the first classes, or?
Yeah, close,
what
2005.
Year? 2005, so Birthright has been around 7 years now, so
yeah.
It was probably the first year.
Second year.
Second year?
First or second year.
First or second year. So do you think the report that you worked on, and the work that you've done with Policy Forum Armenia, do you think that was impacted at all by your work with Birthright and the exposure you had to that mindset?
Don't be influenced that you're sitting next to me, okay?
Eddie doesn't know this, but every time I have the opportunity to talk about Birthright Armenia, one of the first things, I have to apologize. It's very hard for me to slow down. I'm going to try my best to do so.
Can you just tell them I've been telling you to slow down?
And yeah, Art has been telling me to slow down throughout this whole process. But one of the things that I say about Birthright Armenia every time I speak to people is that Birthright is not an organization. In fact, it's almost offensive to call it that. It is an experience unlike anything else. I accidentally fell into Birthright, almost literally. I was in Armenia in 2005 when I heard about the organization, then took part in it. But absolutely, you know, the connection that I felt with Armenia was strengthened through my experience with Birthright, and I think it really helps you see things in a different light. It really gives you another perspective in terms of what isn't important to Armenia. And you definitely do come back more energized and feeling as if you need to contribute in your own way. So.
Okay. Thank you very much for that answer. So I am going to start with a question. We'll give it to Razmik. Is there a difference, from your experience, is there a difference between the notorious oligarchs and the government? And is it even possible to separate these two?
Why do I get the controversial questions?
Because you're so good at handling them.
It could be on YouTube.
Yes, it could be on YouTube. Let me first say that I'm speaking on my own behalf here. I don't represent any institution, even though I work for one. So, is there a difference? Let me give you a bit of a broader answer. I used to teach, and I work in what is now the former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. And the question you're asking is not unique to Armenia. The question you're asking is also relevant to Azerbaijan, to Georgia, to Russia, to Ukraine. I was on a mission to Ukraine recently, and the same question was asked. The short answer is these two are intertwined. And you can see that in the makeup of parliament. You can see that in the influence these people have on public policy and things like that. So the short answer, no, they are intertwined. But then again, we also have to see it's not that different from many other places in the world. You know, I'm astounded as a Canadian to hear how much money is spent on elections here in the United States, for example. The big money does have influence on politics. The problem in Armenia is that it's not institutionalized. There is no oversight, and there is no way that the rule of law is applicable. Someone with impunity could break the law, and they can buy their way out of it if they have the connections, if they have the money. That's what the problem is, and that's what we're trying to address. If this, you know, the same thing happened in Russia, right? I mean, oligarchs who had all the billions in the world, they were on the wrong side of politics, they ended up in prison. So, as diasporans, we tend to, you know, we want the best for Armenia, and we want this not to be the case, but, you know, quite frankly, that is the case, and that is the case in many places in that part of the world. Politicians get into office poor and live off as billionaires. So, you know, that's how it goes.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to throw a question at Edgar. I'm not sure what your opinion is, but a member of the audience asked, what are your thoughts on the role of the Armenian Church in promoting human rights, rule of law, anti-corruption? Should it play a role, and if so, how?
One of the things we didn't cover here tonight was the addendum to our report, which addresses this question directly. The Armenian Church definitely does have a role, and what we have seen, particularly in the last 4 years, is the blurring of the separation of church and state. To a large extent, especially Armenia, has become sort of the spokesperson for the government, and tends to, has become more politicized than we would want it to be. And I would say that's the church's role. The church and state, they have separate roles, and we should make sure that we keep it that way. When you dissipate the line, how would you describe it?
Separation of church and state.
Yeah, but dissipation of that line, that is something that we should watch out for, and we should make sure that our leaders are aware of this, that, yeah, exactly, that you know, we notice it, and we do not want the church to become involved in politics. Unfortunately, again, this has been the case for quite some time, more so in the last 4 years, and especially by the So I think the church has to pull back from politics and then stay away from that.
In theory, what Edgar said is right, but I wouldn't say the last 4 years. I would say the last 400 years, the church and the state, the church and politics have been intertwined in the Armenian case. So let's look at it from a historical perspective. That's nothing new. Vasquez Gatorigos used to put out communiques regarding Vietnam War and things like that to appease the communist regime, because then he could get away with other things within Armenia. So this kind of
It was the Soviet Union.
yeah. So I'm just saying this church and state is not. And the Catholicos himself would actually say that the church's role is also national role, et cetera, et cetera. So, just a historical perspective on that.
Which, I agree with that. I definitely agree with that, but I think post-2008, we've seen a drastic increase in the churches. And in fact, I don't have the details here with me, so I'm not going to speak in specifics, but there was even a memorandum of understanding signed between the government and the church, further blurring the lines between church and state. So I agree with what you're saying. I just think that that's been more the case in the last 4 years. We've seen an increase in that than previously.
Well, I'm going to add something. When any person used to go to Armenia, the one thing you would absolutely do is go to Etchmancy. Okay, and the past Vehapars would always welcome you, the entourage of diasporans. Your year, we probably took you to Etchmancy, and I don't know, the first few years of Birthright we did. In the last few years of Birthright, we've decided that a visit to Etchmancy and Vehapar is not a necessary experience when you are living in Armenia. That was, yeah, that's the way it is.
Okay, I'm actually going to take from a question that was raised. It was more of a comment, but I'm going to throw it back at Edil. Somebody from Armenia said, hearing all these lectures, I happily call my friends and family about good things happening in Armenia, and they laugh at me and say, you Americans are so naive and believe everything the government tells you. My question is, if we use the birthright students or the birthright individuals as almost a symbol, do you find them to be more naive or more realistic? In other words, are they Pollyannish about what they see? Because what we don't want is people to see what's really happening and then turn their back on it and say, we have no interest in becoming developed leaders.
Okay, who's been to Hayastan? Raise your hands. Okay, now, okay, keep your hands up. Okay, now, I want to know, now, if your experience was a bad one, keep your hands up. Okay, okay, so.
But that's at Disneyland.
Wait, no, it's not, because at the end of the day, when we go to Armenia, we bond with the taxi drivers, we bond with the woman selling the zavigs in the street corner. I mean, if you're not the tourist bus, don't get out of the Marriott hotel kind of Armenians, which you're probably not. You're out on the streets and you're talking to the people, and in the end of the day, the people of Armenia are amazing people, okay? And so, and they have great hope, and they are, so for me, the beauty of the Armenian experience is to ensure that when you go to Armenia, you don't get the whitewashed version, but you spend time talking to the people, and you're going to hear horrible stories. But absolutely, there are a huge section of the population that has fallen through the cracks because of the breakup of the Soviet Union. But there are wonderful institutions in the diaspora that are trying to help. The HEB is one of them, and that are trying to, tie the strings so that they can survive until the end of their lives. But at the end of the day, Armenia is a great country filled with 2.4 million voting, wonderful people.
Just to add to that, when you're Armenian, and sure, you experience things that do definitely bother you, but to ask, is it a great place or are good things happening there? A story that happened to me in 2008. Right before I was getting ready to leave Armenia, and I think 2 or 3 days before I was scheduled to fly out, I got into a taxi and we headed out. Halfway to where I was going, I was involved in a head-on collision with a Range Rover. So here I am in a Soviet Vana going head-to-head against the Range Rover. I get out of the car and I touch my face and my nose was halfway across my face. And what happened in the days that followed really inspired me. The gentlemen who were in the car in the Range Rover immediately got out, put me in their car, took me to the hospital, made sure I got the best care, visited me 3 or 4 times, and then refused to accept a no when they offered to come to the airport to see me off. I said, no, you don't need to, no, we're going to, and then they were there. At the same time, I needed to put my flight back by a week or two so they could remove the cast. You know, they made sure everything was taken care of. So that's another experience. Sure, you definitely do come across things that bother you, but at the same time, the people are amazing, and then just a second what Eddie said.
I'm just going to answer two of the questions because they're quick answers that came from the audience, and then I want to see if anyone has questions for the mic. But number one is, where do we get a full copy of the report? You can go to pf-armenia.org. So it's pf, as in policy forum, -armenia.org, and you'll find many more reports than just this one that I think you'll find worthwhile. Okay, and Kathy tells me there's a sheet on your seats that does include that website, so I encourage you to do that. The second question that came out actually leads me to something I was going to do in the conclusion, which I'll do now. The question is, why did the Lindsay Foundation abandon Armenia? And I did have to make a point of clarification because representatives preferred that the way it should be referred to in the flyer that was distributed is that it was the closure of the Lindsay Foundation and the reallocation of its assets to UCLA. So now I, wearing my professional hat, will say, well, there have been reports of why they may have pulled out of Armenia, and people can dispute those reports or question those reports or dispute them. But the reality is there have been a lot of reports about what may or may not have happened, but they did request that we make that clarification, so I am making it for the record, and you are certainly welcome to Google it and see whatever was reported in the past. Okay, if I can paraphrase the question and tell me if I'm wrong, but this actually speaks to the issue of when diasporan Armenians, whether from America or Russia, we all know all of the diasporas that give and how they give, but the question is, what percentage of those funds actually get to the people, and what is the level of frustration of those in need that they're not really getting the assistance, or the level of frustration of those who give, who feel that our dollars are not going to the right places. And I think this actually speaks to something that I believe Razmik was talking about, institutionalizing some mechanism, whether it's for assistance or whether it's for, support, interaction, and that also ties to another question that we had gotten, which I want to get to as many questions as possible, which I'm not going to find now. So actually, if you can speak to it to some extent, and then I will follow up with this other question when I find it. Razmik.
Okay. Whether we like or do not like Armenia, it's not so much the issue. And the way to do it is not to put up hands. I mean, sorry, I'm not being critical. I could ask the same question and say, how many people here have actually lived in Armenia for more than 1 month? 3, 4, 5. Once you start going behind the buildings, then you start to see the real Armenia. So I don't want to dampen the enthusiasm that it's a great place and all that. Yes, we all have wonderful stories, we all have negative stories. I can go on and on about the negative stories, but I won't. Now, but it's not a competition, who likes it the most or who doesn't like it and all that. It's a country, it has the good, it has the bad. We're trying to acknowledge the good, we're trying to address the bad. And I think that's what it is at the end of the day. Now, institutionalizing it, the GDP of Armenia, the gross domestic product of Armenia, is roughly $10 billion a year. That's the size of the economy. The figures are from 2 years ago, so it might be different now. It is estimated that about $1 billion comes into Armenia from the diaspora, remittances. Now, don't get carried away. This is not your money. This is mostly the Armenians who are working in Russia sending money home. Most of it, that's what it is. So about 10% of the economy, or the overall economy, is being sustained by people who work in Russia and sending money home. Can you institutionalize this? No. Should you? No. This is how it should be. It should be family to family, decentralized. It's going directly to where it's needed. Now, there are institutional mechanisms, the Hayastan Fund and things like that. And you donate money here on the telethon. It goes wherever. And this is where things start getting murky and people ask questions. Is it going to the right place? Who's getting a cut out of it and all that? But frankly, folks, the money that the Telethon collects and sends to Armenia is loose change compared to the money that goes from the European Union, that goes from all sorts of other sources to Armenia. This is where, if there is siphoning going on, this is where it's taking place. It's not from the few $100s or few $1000s that's going there. Yes, there are cases of schools being built with improper material and money being siphoned off and all that, but it happens. I wouldn't look so much into the institutions of the diaspora. I would look into the international institutions and how these are being used and manipulated and things of that sort. I think that's where the real source of the corruption and the misuse of funds is.
You actually addressed the other question, so I'm going to move on. One of the questions that came is, large organizations such as AGBU, FAR, etc., may not be present tonight or aren't represented. How do they deal with the Armenian government and the oligarchs? And I'm not sure who I would direct that to because I'm here as an individual. I mean, I think for, and I'm speaking as an individual and I want to make that very clear, any of us with a conscience who do things for Armenia and who ask people to help us do things for Armenia do everything in our power to make sure the money is going to exactly the purpose that it's intended for. Are there fail-safe measures? I don't know. I've worked in government off and on for 20-something years, 26 years, 25 years. I can't even say that about institutions we have here. But if there is a specific project or a program, and I guess I will direct this to any one of the three of you, if there is a specific project or program, is there a way to make sure that those funds are allocated and used for the purposes they're intended for? My experience is that yes, there is, but it depends what the project or the program is. So I'd be curious to hear what others' opinions are on that.
The problem is that, in all honesty, you're going to be offended by this, but the giving is the easy part. The hard part is making sure that the money that we all give actually is used productively. And that every institution needs to make sure that they have in Armenia trustworthy people who understand the level of auditing that we as Americans are used to make sure that, the level of graft is minimal, or, I can't say non-existent, but is minimal, and as much as possible, we make sure that the people who are receiving the aid are truly the people that need it. I'm sure that the AGBU has a way of vetting to make sure that the people that go into their soup kitchen are the ones that truly need it. But for me, I just wanted to also say that, we as Americans know this, we may not like to hear about it, but if we, if the large organizations like FAR and AGBU want to work in Armenia, they can't afford to every day piss off the government and all the ministers that they need the cooperation to make their projects happen. Because at the end of the day, you need permits to get the school built. You need the Ministry of Health to okay that program so you can distribute, public health flyers. So they do need to be a little bit more politically correct than we in the diaspora perhaps would like them to be, but you also have to understand it from their perspective, that they are technically, guests in that country, and they're trying to do good things, and they need, in a very small country, those few with power to allow them to do and give them the permits they need. So sometimes it's not as black as white as we like.
I'm going to ask another question, which I'll start with Edil, because I'm trying not to guess who is potentially the most optimistic on this panel. We're trying to be positive. But a question came that if people there are fairly content and hopeful, because one of the points I made in the first lecture is you can't have any of the good things go on if there's no hope. And right now there's a sense of hopelessness. At least we in America, as American diasporans, perceive that. If there is hopefulness, why are people leaving the country in droves? And I even question the numbers that are being given by Edgar. Out of 3 million voters, I've done politics a long time, there is no way you have 2.4 million voters. But the question is, are there even 3 million And the reality is people are leaving the country, don't worry about the numbers. So why would people be leaving if there's a sense of optimism that some would like to portray?
I mean, I love Armenia. I think that I'm realistic. I absolutely agree with you. I mean, I think I said it, you know, until their stomachs are filled, until their kids are getting a good education, until they have a job, that is their woe of the day. I mean, they don't care who the president of Armenia is. That's their issue. And, you know, for me, so I think that in general, the people of Armenia, they're wonderful hostesses, and they will always show their country in the best light possible. And when you scratch the surface and you ask those questions, or when you visit your relatives, you'll really hear their woes. The hopefulness that I see is because our Birthright alumni, whose average age is maybe 24, is spending most of their time bonding with those people at that age bracket who don't remember the Soviet Union, who are many of them are taking advantage of great education like AUA, which is an amazing institution, and they're multilingual, and they see their own opportunities. Sadly, most of them are forced to leave Armenia because of that. But I will tell you, if any of you read that New York Times article that about the diasporans in India and whatever going back now finally and actually deciding, well, you know what, I'm going to start a business in Armenia. My hope is, you know, I need them to go wherever they need to go to get the jobs, to make their money. I'm okay with that. But I believe those 20-something-year-olds, if Armenia can get its act together, if we can figure out a way to create jobs, we'll go back to Armenia just like the Indians are going back and the Chinese are going back. That's my hope.
Edgar, a question directed at you. The everyday practice of death threats, shakedowns, forced perjuries, fake suicides, and other acts of terror to, quote, solve problems is keeping the populace in tow. Who has or might have the moral courage to overcome it? How risky is it? Should the diaspora take a zero-tolerance stand on such issues, and can it make a difference?
Let me turn the question back around. How risky is it attending this event here today? And how much moral courage does it take to be here and partake in this event today? Right? And that's the issue.
A little bit with that video.
Well, the answer is there is no risk, and you know, it does not necessarily involve a tremendous amount of moral courage to partake in some of these things and to stand up to death threats and things of this sort. Again, as I touched upon in the presentation, we have an obligation, in my opinion, to act as a policing agent, both for the relationship of our leaders with the leadership of Armenia and for Yerevan itself. And Eddie is correct. I'm absolutely sure the embassy is aware of this event. And by showing up here today, you've been courageous, and you've had the moral courage, and you've taken the risk, whatever risk there is involved, not being the answer, of standing up to these things. And this is all we have to do. This is, in my opinion, this is the obligation of the diaspora on this topic. Be informed, be aware, and don't stand for it. It's great to see everybody in this room here supporting nodding, but at the same time, let me be blunt, in 2008, there were over 100 Nodics, and not many rooms like this were filled in the diaspora. So this is a great event. We should keep at it. But keep in mind that it's not only Nodic Harusunia, but there's hundreds of other people who are subjected to these same abuses on a daily basis in Armenia.
Adil said something very interesting insofar as, you know, look at the AGBU, look at the Dashnak Party, look at all these diaspora organizations who work there. They have to be careful because they work there, right? That's the reality of the world. It's not only in Armenia, and it's not only these organizations. But also Armenia is not Zimbabwe, it's not North Korea, right? So you know there is some degree of openness as long as you don't cross certain red lines. But the diaspora, because it's here, it actually can, coming back to something I said earlier, can act to some degree as the conscience of the republic. You know, human rights observatory center in the diaspora, which there used to be in the Soviet time, you know, this type of stuff. But this kind of organization that is independent, that doesn't have a real interest in Armenia, can actually, in the diaspora, act as some sort of a center that highlights problems that relate to human rights. And this type of things actually do work, and they do work in other countries and in other environments. Let's not look at the established diasporan organizations to be this, because they cannot. They simply cannot. They have vested interests in Armenia, and they have to protect them. From an institutional perspective, you understand that. So, you know, yes, we can be brave, but we can also be a bit more vocal.
Thank you. Or the other take I would take on that is established organizations have programs they believe are working, doing good, helping however they are. So these are not, these are kind of separate from all the other good work that needs to be done. So it's a collective process.
One of the issues that keeps being raised is the issue of due process versus what the rules are and whatever else. But Sado, go ahead if you want to take a minute to answer that.
Sure. Well, my brother, he said on national TV in Armenia, on the internet, and repeatedly in press conferences that if we owe taxes, we certainly are going to pay those taxes. Okay? I think that from Truth and Consequences 1 to today, the whole thing was about the rule of law. I, my family, and Nadik have asked for the rule of law to apply. If we are not going to abide by rule of law, I mean, what kind of logic is that? So obviously, we're absolutely looking forward to having a platform where we could establish the tax situation. But I'll answer it another way. It's no longer about taxes. This whole thing is really not about taxes, paying of taxes and not paying of taxes. So that's the second answer to the first one. But I think that the important part is here that in terms of diasporans here, and I mean, if I may just take a minute to say something, I'm trained as an economist. Diasporans have to become stakeholders in Armenia, okay? Not just simply in terms of giving on, and that's great work, and Birthright Armenia does great work, and critical work is done by All Armenia Fund and the telethons, and I understand all that. And then when we give, and we wonder, but it goes to where it goes. But I think that people have become stakeholders. They have to invest individually, not large. Direct investment from individuals into an investment fund that would help Armenia. I think that's how it should start as diasporans. I mean, that's from an economist viewpoint. As far as the rule of law goes, taxes are a normal course of business. You know, businesses accrue taxes and you pay taxes, and if there's an infraction, you figure it out and you take care of it. There's no problem there. But this thing is a little bit beyond the tax issue.
Thank you, Sado. And I'm going to actually just build on that for 1 second, because one of our goals tonight is to start having at least small, concrete steps or something. So one idea that we can float out there, and I don't even know where to begin, but Razmir, you taught at the London School of Economics, so you might understand this. If we had a venture capital fund that was focused on Armenia specifically, as one idea, and the investments, but then all the commensurate checks and balances that go along with that, that might be something to consider. Another one, and this ties to a question that I want to ask, and I'll go back to the audience, and I really want to ask all three of you, is another concrete suggestion. Could we possibly lobby the government of Armenia to appoint a diasporan? Does not have to be an American diasporan, but a diasporan Armenian to be the minister of diasporan ministry. So if it's someone from outside who understands the concerns of the outside but has the confidence of the government, is that even a realistic suggestion?
I'll start because Saro put his finger exactly on the issue. And I don't think he realized it though. He said that we must become stakeholders in the economy of Armenia, right? Precisely this is the point. There are a lot of important people in Armenia who do not want you to be stakeholders in Armenia. So the answer to your question that is not a venture capital fund, because the answer to it is not an economic answer. The answer to it is a political answer. And this is where it gets murky, and this is where it gets extremely difficult to deal with it. The first question you asked me is if the economic elite and the political elite are intertwined. And I said, yes, they are. Hence the problem. You go into an economy that is already divided into fiefdoms, and then you try to upset that. any country in this world, you're going to have resistance to that, and they're going to use the laws or misuse the laws against you. So I think we have to understand the nature of the problem before we come up with a solution. Vasquez Sarkisian, before he got assassinated, wanted to do precisely what you suggested. Come and invest here, and I would guarantee your investment personally. He didn't survive in order to see that happen, but nevertheless, that boat we have missed as a diaspora, we have missed that boat, and we missed that boat from the mid-90s onwards. And again, it's not the fault of the diaspora, but that's the reality of the Armenian economy.
Not everything is political. And so I'm thinking about myself. I have definitely the means to do business in Armenia. I run 20 companies in America, and I have the ability to do it. I choose not to. Why? Because what little experience I've seen through Birthright and the charitable things I've done, I don't have the patience to work in a country where the rules are so complicated, intentionally so, okay, including the tax laws, that, I could not in good conscience, make decisions day to day, because it's not clear to me from the get-go what are the rules, what are the tax laws, what are the legally, what can I do? Just to sign a lease in Armenia, I go through 17 hoops and lawyers that in America I would do in 2 minutes. So for me, I choose not to. I believe that in the end, if you're hyperly successful, if I invested in Armenia and I became massively successful, that there would be political pressure on me. But as a general rule, on the smaller scale, I believe that there are examples, many examples of diasporans that have gone and done it. I personally don't do it because I don't have the patience to deal with the bureaucracy that's kind of the post-Soviet mess. But I don't think that it's impossible to do business in Armenia. I don't know if it could be done on a large scale, and if it was done on a large scale, I absolutely believe it would get political. But that's my view.
Can we lobby the Ministry of the Diaspora to appoint the diasporan as minister? Short answer, I don't see why not. But at the same time, at least speaking for myself, I have a fundamental problem with the context in which the Ministry of the Diaspora was set up. It was immediately after President Sargsyan's election, and it is my opinion, and this is my opinion, that it was a pacifier to the diaspora. Here, have what you want, be quiet, don't say anything else. Worked. And again, this is my opinion. I don't think their choice of a diaspora minister is an appropriate one. But yes, absolutely, I think we can. The question is, can we turn that ministry into an actual one and make it serve the purpose that it's supposed to serve? So yes, we can. And then to your question, I think that's, if you have an opportunity, I would really suggest reading the report, because what you just said, I think, is pretty much what the report talks about. And it talks about how to institutionally try to find a way to address some of the problems that we have.
I spent a good part of my professional life in the last 10 years precisely on capacity building issues, and it's exactly what you're saying. This is international development that needs to be done. It's capacity building. It is this kind of work that actually changes mentality, policy, and eventually has an impact. The only caveat that I would add is to say on technical issues like health, it's not really a problem. When it comes to more sensitive political issues, economic issues, then it becomes much more difficult to do. But the point to look at, as you know very well, is to look at the trend, which way things are going. And this is where things start getting depressing, because the trend in certain sectors in Armenia is not that positive. In health, it might be, and that's great. That's precisely what it should be. Hopefully, we can transplant that into the other elements as well. One point I want to come back to the gentleman in the Ministry of the Diaspora and whatever. The job of any minister, doesn't matter who it is to protect the interest of the state, of Yerevan, of Armenia. That's how it should be. If a minister does not do that, then he or she is not doing her job. So it doesn't matter if the minister is diasporan or not diasporan, is Chinese or Zimbabwean or whatever the case might be, but the minister must protect the interest of the state. And I think the better question to ask is that what is it that we could do in order to lobby the minister, whoever that minister is, in order to take diasporan interest into account much more effectively than she is currently doing.